Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us for episode 706 of People Behind the Science. I'm your host, Dr. Marie McNeely, and in this episode, we are excited to be rebroadcasting our interview with Dr. Andrew Alleyne, originally published on July 10th of 2017. Listeners, Andrew is an engineer who works on control systems, as well as developing and implementing advanced control algorithms with a variety of applications. And in particular, he's widely recognized for his research developing innovative systems and tools for energy and power systems, manufacturing systems, and transportation systems. And in our conversation, Andrew is going to share more about his life in science. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of People Behind the Science.
Every day, discoveries are made that will change our understanding of the world around us. Dr. Marie McNeely is here to bring you the brilliant minds who are making these discoveries so they can share their incredible stories and take you on an amazing journey. Welcome to People Behind the Science.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to People Behind the Science. Today, I am thrilled to introduce you all to Dr. Andrew Alleyne. So, Andrew, welcome to the show today. How are you?
I'm doing well, Marie. Thanks very much for having me on.
Well, I am excited to chat with you about your work and your career. But before we dive into all the details, Andrew, I do want to take a moment to tell our listeners just a little bit about you. So, listeners, Andrew is the Ralph and Catherine Fisher Professor in the Department of Mechanical Science and Engineering, as well as the director of the National Science Foundation Center on Power Optimization of Electro-Thermal Systems, headquartered at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Andrew actually grew up in Jamaica, and he came to the United States in high school. He received his bachelor's degree in Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering from Princeton University, and Andrew went on to study mechanical engineering at the University of California, Berkeley, where he was awarded his master's and Ph.D. degrees. In 1994, Andrew joined the faculty at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, where he remains today. And listeners, Andrew has received many awards and honors throughout his career, including an NSF CAREER Award, the Xerox Award for Faculty Research, a Fulbright Fellowship, the SAE International Ralph R. Teetor Educational Award, the American Society for Mechanical Engineers Dynamic Systems and Control Division Outstanding Young Investigator Award, as well as their Gustus Larson Memorial Award. And in addition, he has also been named a Fellow of the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. And listeners, Andrew is here with us today to talk about his life and his research. So today, Andrew, we want to get to know you both as a person, but also as a scientist. We want to see both sides here. So can you start by telling us what you like to do when you're not doing science?
That's an excellent question, so thanks for that. The things that I like to do when I'm not doing science have evolved over time, and that's part of being a person. I think when I was a little bit younger, starting off my career, I really sort of strove for that healthy body, healthy mind type of activity. So when I was not doing science, when I wasn't in the class or in the lab, I was usually playing sports of some type. I've tried to be very active. Over time, you get older and there are more responsibilities, life happens. So nowadays, when I'm not doing science, the most of my time is spent trying to keep up with two teenage boys and two-career household. There's a lot of driving to soccer games and practices and all sorts of other activities, band, that kind of stuff. It is very good for keeping you balanced. It's a different kind of balance than the exercise and sports thing, but nonetheless, it helps you understand and appreciate that yes, science is important. It's vital. It's a critical part of who you are, but it's not all that you are. And so I would probably say nowadays it's sort of the family side of things when I'm not doing science, both the family side of things for keeping everybody on track, but also some fun things. We do road trips. We have fun together. It's great to grow and experience what it's like. We have, I think, at least one budding scientist in the family now. I think my 15-year-old will probably go into biological sciences of some type. So it's kind of cool to be able to discuss things with him about genetics and resistant bacteria and things like that. So that's what I do.
That's awesome. That's a lot. So now you mentioned sports and how you've sort of been a sports fanatic as you were growing up. Is there a sport that you still like to try and play every now and then?
Like to and able to are two different things, Marie.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
No, I think I'm pretty much past the age where I can play anything competitively. Right now, it is pretty much low impact. My knees and my back are not what they used to be. And so it's a lot of rowing machines or ellipticals or just being in the gym, working weights. The days of being out on the court. I used to play a lot of basketball. Those are kind of sort of behind me.
Gotcha. Get to kick the soccer ball around with the boys every now and then?
Every once in a while.
Yeah. Probably at that age, they'll run in circles around you.
Oh, God, yes.
Oh, well, wonderful to get a window into your life outside of science, Andrew. And I love what you mentioned here, that the science is a big part of your life, but you're able to maintain balance, to have a life outside of science, to enjoy time with your family and do all these other things. Because I think that's really important for young scientists out there to realize.
Agreed 100%. And let me tell you, Marie, I sort of stumbled on that one a little bit because I had something that I could hold on to, particularly the sports side. And it was actually very effective to channel some of that competitive nature in sports into the career. But it's also been really, really good to sort of broaden that out when you can do the family side of things. And it's a wonderful way to reflect, understand what you're doing is important, but not, like I say, the most important thing. Or the other thing I found is that you start thinking about doing stuff, not necessarily just for your own accolades, but how to affect other people. What will you bring to society? Because you start to realize that you now have other folks that are going to be in a society that you're going to leave behind. And so it's been a good, for lack of a better term, reflection capability that the family sort of brought to the table.
Definitely. Well, wonderful, like I said, to hear about life outside of science, but we do want to dive into your science next. So, Andrew, can you tell us how you describe your work to someone who's not familiar with science or engineering?
So what I do, fundamentally, I'm what's called a controls researcher. I work in their control systems. And what the controls does is it basically makes decisions. And it's an automated way of making decisions. We take in information. And what we, at the heart of it, do is use algorithms, mathematical algorithms, computer code, whatever you want to call it, to come out with the right decisions based on the information we've gathered. It's not that different from an economist gathering information about the state of the economy and figuring out, okay, do I raise interest rates? Do I lower interest rates? Mm-hmm. You take your consumer price index or some other inflation or an unemployment, and you sort of gather it all in, and then you sort of figure out, okay, well, do I change this variable up or down? And the figuring out, that's my area of expertise. In your home, if you have one of those fancy thermostats, it's doing the same thing. It's gathering information about the temperature in your house. And then based on that, it figures out whether to turn the air conditioning on or off, or the heater up or down. It's that figuring out. It's sometimes a little bit hidden, but it is critical. Making the right decision at the right time. Boy, you've seen for some of these self-driving cars, unfortunately, there have been some incidents where they've made the wrong decision.
Sure. And
bad things have happened. What we really try to do in our field is ensure that we make the right decision every time. It is sometimes made challenging by not having full knowledge of the things that we're trying to make decisions about. So maybe the information that we're getting is corrupted, or we don't get the full picture. But yet you still have to make a decision, and you have to make a timely one. Do your best job. Those are the kinds of things that we work on. I often try and describe it to other people that we're not in, even technology. There's also a human dimension to it. There's this concept that we have in our decision-making community. You don't want things to go unstable. You want them to stay stable, meaning that things don't get out of control. So there is a concept in our community called a small gain theorem that says in a feedback loop, where there is an actor and then there is an effect, and that effect comes back to affect the actor of the original action. Mm-hmm. If the gain, as it were, of the effect around that whole loop is less than 1, then that organization or entity or system is going to stay stable. If you've ever been in a situation where you've been in a heated discussion with somebody else, and the two people are the system, I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where somebody says something, and based on what somebody says, the other person says something that is as inflammatory or greater.
Right. It just escalates. Yeah.
And it escalates and it goes unstable. I've taught all my students now, remember the small gain theorem. If you and your partner are having a discussion and they say something, think about whether or not you want that gain to be greater than 1 or less than 1. Mm-hmm. When you feed that information back to them, if you can keep it less than 1, that conversation will stabilize and you can get through it. If you actually go ahead and do something more inflammatory, good luck to you.
Right. Well, I love this description that you have and this analogy that you've drawn. And I have to ask, are you one of these highly systematic people who applies algorithms or approaches decisions and problems in your life with these type of mentality?
Scarily enough, yes.
It sounded like it.
Yes. Some people like it, some people don't, particularly if you're dealing with people that perhaps shoot from the hip or a little bit more emotional in their decision making. But yes, I do.
That is awesome. So now tell us, Andrew, what motivates you? I think you're doing so many awesome things in the lab. You've got a lot going on in your life outside of science. What really keeps you going at it every day? Do you have a favorite saying or a quote or a force that keeps you going?
As far as a favorite motivational quote that I could think of, there's one that stuck with me from a very early age. It's by a poet called Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, and it's a long poem. The Ladder of St. Augustine. It's a very, very long one. But the thing that people always sort of recall or focus on is that, and I'm paraphrasing here, that the heights of great men reached and kept were not attained by sudden flight, but while their comrades slept, they were toiling onward through the night, or something like that. That has been really instrumental in my life, even from a very, very early age, because what it says is, look, you can't control the talents that you're given. It's God-given. It's what you're born with. What you can control is you control the effort that you put in.
Right.
And if you choose, you can be one of those that rests and takes it easy, or you can be one of those that says, I'm going to give it 110%. I'm going to ensure that while other folks might be taking the easy road out, I'm going to put forward my best effort day in and day out. And that really has stayed with me ever since I was a little kid. Perseverance, pushing forward. Even if there's setbacks, you pick yourself up and you keep going again. That is a key one that has kept me going. Another one that is really good is Albert Einstein's quote that says, if we knew what we were doing, it wouldn't be research.
Right.
That's an awesome one because it's very freeing. It's liberating. It says, hey, look, go, mess around, figure things out, poke.
It doesn't have to be perfect the first time. Yeah.
As a matter of fact, Marie, it can be flat out wrong. There is no penalty for failure apart from you have now learned what doesn't work if you do it systematically. And that has also been a very, very motivational one. And one that I try and impart to the people that I work with. And you said, what sort of gets you up in the morning? The quotes, yes. A big part of what gets me up and going in the morning is the people that I get to work with, because I get to work with some awesome people. And really, if you're working with awesome people and you enjoy that, it's easy to come to work in the morning.
That is fantastic. Well, I love all of these motivational forces saying quotes that you shared with us today. And I'm curious to hear about some of these people who you might have encountered along your scientific journey, or maybe are working with today, who have been role models or mentors or just inspirational figures for you.
There have been many. And they've come from all walks of life. As a student of human nature, and you might think it odd that an engineer would be a student of human nature, I do have humanists in my family and social scientists, and they've sort of alerted me to the role that the social science plays in successful individual careers as well as organizations. And there have been many, many people in most activities that I go into. I do try and observe people and see if there are things that I can learn. But if you ask me to sort of crystallize it to a couple, they're really a couple that had a tremendous influence on me. One of them is my late advisor, a guy by the name of Carl Hedrick. He was a professor at Berkeley. He was my advisor when I was doing a PhD. And everybody says, so they're influenced by their advisor, and he taught me so much. In this situation, it was really special. He passed away, unfortunately, a little bit earlier this year after a very quick bout of cancer. Carl was a very accomplished individual, very well recognized. He would have many, many awards that you could read off. But also, he taught me how to keep life in balance. He taught me that people matter, not so much by what he said, but what he did. He made time for his family and also made time for his work, and he sort of made it all fit, and he compartmentalized things. And I'll never forget sort of one of his quotes, which was, there are few problems in this world that are so great they cannot be solved over a good glass of Chardonnay.
I love that.
Which is, some people get so wound up in things that seem so critical. If you just relax a little bit and let's sit down and think through this and decompress a little bit, maybe a glass of Chardonnay, take a step back. You can see your way clear to a solution. And I've sort of tried to keep to that, particularly on balancing the work and family thing. Absolutely. He was very much a role model in that sense. The second guy, actually, they're both guys, would be my father. My dad pretty much taught me most things non-technically related to sort of my career. He was the one, I think, actually, that gave me that Longfellow poem that I talked about earlier.
Oh, yeah.
The value of hard work, the value of perseverance, focus, dedication to what you're doing, striving for excellence. Only your best is good enough. That was instilled in me in a relatively early age, and he walked the walk. He didn't just talk the talk. He'd be excellent at everything you're doing. Any job worth doing is worth doing well. That has really stayed with me. But much like Carl, he was also able to instill in me the desire to have fun in what you're doing, enjoy what you're doing. If it's work, boy, that's going to be a long day. If it's an opportunity to explore, play, or do something that you're passionate about, it's going to be a relatively short day, and you're going to enjoy it, and you're going to smile every once in a while. He also taught me the value of not just having fun working at what you're doing, but how do you make other people that you're working with enjoy what they're doing, right? If you can create that atmosphere that everybody is enjoying to the extent possible, doing what they're doing, you can create an environment where everybody wins. And it's a self-fulfilling positive feedback. And it's a skill. It really is a skill to have everybody, again, be positive in an organization. Those are the two folks that really influenced me the most.
Well, Andrew, it sounds like you had some fantastic and inspiring figures in your life. And I wonder, where did your interest in this science and engineering begin? Was your father also one of these people that instilled that interest in you?
Not so much. He was a medical doctor. My mom was a social scientist. And so neither of them knew much about engineering, but they did foster my creativity and my desire. From a very young age, growing up, I was just fascinated by all sorts of mechanical things. I was fascinated by cars, or I had a tremendous number of Lego blocks. I was fascinated by things that flew. I would try and build flying things, all sorts of flying things. I'd build my own kites and sort of experiment with different types of shapes. And this is in middle school, where you're trying to figure out what's an airfoil, what makes an efficient airfoil, what's an angle of attack. Can you really tell the difference between this angle attack or that angle attack, and how this particular airfoil-like surface flies? And then you go out and you build it, and boy, you're there with your Elmer's glue and your paper and your balsa woods, and then you throw it up there and see if it actually flies. And once I started doing those kinds of things and building my own models, I was pretty hooked on wanting to be an engineer. I knew that was sort of what I wanted to do. And then you read books or you see stories about people going into space or building fantastic aircraft that were human powered, which was amazing. I remember back in the 70s, early 80s, they had a human powered aircraft that crossed the British Channel. And I was just wondering, how do you make something like that? Boy, that's just so cool. That's really when it started, tinkering around. Every once in a while, there was a little bit of a mistake on the chemistry side, and fires were started, and I had very forgiving parents.
That helps, yeah.
Yeah, they understood. They didn't want to stifle the creativity, but that's really, really where it started. And it just stayed, that desire to work on things that are cool, that appreciation for things that are technical. I was asked recently, if you could have any car in the world, what would it be? And I had just come back from California, and California is one of the few places where they sell cars. Honda and Toyota sell cars that are actually powered by fuel cells. Many people might go for an expensive car or a fast car. Mm-hmm. I couldn't help but answer, look, I want this because it's the coolest thing. It runs on a fuel that nothing else does. It's got multiple modes of power that flow to the wheels. It's just cool. And I remember the person that I was talking to was just sort of puzzled at that. It's got no status associated with it. It doesn't fit a whole lot of people.
Right. Where's your Ferrari? Where's your, yeah.
Exactly. And I was like, nope, you don't understand. Look at the technology in this thing. So that technology seed, it got planted early. It took hold and grew into a pretty solid foundation, and it hasn't left. I still get excited about learning a new technology.
That is awesome. And we mentioned in the introduction there that you did your bachelor's degree at Princeton University. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience there?
Well, it was an interesting place when I was there. They take a very, very sciencey approach to engineering, because that's where Einstein was in their Center for Advanced Study later on in his career. They've had wonderful people that have come through there, and physics and math, and sort of the fundamental sciences are very, very strong there at Princeton. Engineering is sort of like, or it had been, a bit more of a Johnny-come-lately. And I myself am very much an engineer. The difference between like an engineer and a scientist, There's an awesome joke. You've got an engineer and a scientist and their roommates, and one day there's a fire that starts in the kitchen. The engineer is the only one home, and he sort of hears the fire alarm, jumps up, looks around, grabs the fire extinguisher off the wall and puts out the fire, and then he goes back to bed. The next night, the fire starts again in the same kitchen, and the scientist is the one that gets up. And he gets out of bed, he sees the fire, and he looks around, he sees the fire extinguisher on the wall, and then he goes back to bed happy knowing that a solution exists.
Right. The implementation sometimes missing, yeah.
And I have to actually see it through to the implementation. And so I think Princeton gave a wonderful foundation. But one of the things that really sort of drove me to graduate school was that implementation into a physical device. I was not satisfied with the pencil and paper and the theoretical aspects of engineering. Now, Princeton gave a wonderful background in critical thought and having to express your ideas clearly. It was also where I was able to do a lot more of the study of people in terms of sort of my social science classes. And you can actually do a fair bit of posing some of the human dynamic interactions in a scientific and technical context. It really gave me as an institution some of the solid theoretical foundations, but it didn't give me the implementation. And that's what I really felt lacking. And fortunately, moving forward then to Berkeley, I was able to get a lot more of the implementation. I got my knuckles bloodied putting things together, and putting the two pieces together of that type of an education, I think really, really helped me get where I am today. If there is a lesson to be learned there, sometimes it's okay to go with something that you don't know to broaden yourself. Had I stayed in the purely theoretical world, I could have, but I don't believe I would have had as enjoyable a career as I do now. On the flip side, had I gone to a place where it was a little bit more practical, I probably would have then sought out something that was a little more analytical and theoretical for the next phase of my career, just to get that balance and round out my experiences.
Sure. And then from graduate school, I understand you did transition directly into a faculty role. Can you tell us what was the decision that you were making there, and how do you think, kind of looking back, that went?
So this will be an example of do as I say, not as I did. Mm-hmm. Transitioning to the faculty role, interestingly enough, when it comes right down to it, I kind of did it to prove a point and to prove somebody wrong, which is not the best reason to choose a career. Right. When I was going through graduate school, there were very few, actually there were 0 African-American faculty members in the College of Engineering at Berkeley. And I remember having a conversation with the department chair at the time. Look, what's going on? Why not? And his response to me was, well, we've really never found folks that would be appropriate to have at such a prestigious institution like Berkeley. And again, you remember that I played a lot of sports, so there's that competitive nature there. To myself, I'm saying, wait a second, you just said that you're a faculty member at Berkeley, and so you're smarter than I am. And so that's really not acceptable. And it was sort of that challenge to say, well, then I think I'm going to do it, and I'm going to prove a few people wrong. So I decided, okay, we'll try this academic thing. And my advisor, Carl, was very supportive. He said, yeah, I think you can do it. Go for it. He was the one that said, look, I think you can do it now. You don't need to do a postdoc.
Oh, really?
Fire away, man.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I said, hey, you think I should do a postdoc? He said, nope, you're done. Go. I did have a little bit of an advantage in the fact that both my parents were faculty members. And so I kind of sort of had an idea a little bit about what the faculty life was like, but not necessarily in engineering. So that was the start, really. Let's try and see if I can do this. I'll make a point. When I got to Illinois, yes, I was the first African-American faculty member in the department, one of few in the college. And when you're in that situation, you do actually have to step your game up a little bit. People are watching, so you do have to make that extra effort. While your comrades sleep soundly, you do have to be toiling onward through the night to ensure that you achieve those heights of success.
Excellent. So are you happy with your decision to forego the postdoc and go right into the faculty?
I am happy with that decision. That decision worked out well for me. I'm not sure if it would have worked out better. I mean, you can't really go back and replay history.
Right.
But things actually did work out quite well. I was put in a situation where the skill set in the technical area that I had was relatively in short supply at the institution that I went to, and the organization with the institution, Mechanical Engineering. So there was a ready-made need for my skill set, which allowed me to flourish very rapidly. I was also in an organization with a leadership that was quite supportive of me coming through. So I was able to be relatively successful at a relatively early age. The University of Illinois is a wonderful place for, particularly in engineering, for junior faculty, I found. At the time when I came through, they were incredibly supportive. Was it intimidating and seemed like a high mountain to climb? Possibly. But you use that Einstein quote, hey, you sally forth, you take your best shot. You don't worry about whether or not you're going to miss. You push forward, explore all the different types of collaborations that you could possibly have. You try and spot opportunities. You take advantage of them. You don't shrink back from them. And Illinois was a wonderful place to do that. I'm not entirely sure, had I done a postdoc, if things would have turned out any different. Now, when I counsel my own students, there are several of them that I do think should do a postdoc and would benefit. And there's some of them that I think, no, I think you're ready. Much like Carl did with me. He said, no, you're ready. Let's not delay this. Go.
I like it. Well, it sounds like you had a smooth transition then to University of Illinois. And I know you have so much going on in the lab there. It's hard to pick a favorite project sometime, but I'm going to have you do that for me today. Do you have one that you want to tell us just a little bit more about in detail?
Sure. As you said, it's sort of like, who's your favorite kid?
Right. I won't ask you that today. I promise.
Okay. One that I would like to talk about is the one that we're working on now. It's part of that center that I'm a director of. It's a National Science Foundation Engineering Research Center, and these are relatively large projects. They've got a long lifespan to them because you're really trying to move the needle on something that matters to society. And this power optimization for electro-thermal systems is an issue that is incredibly important. People that you'll interview for this podcast, everybody will say it's really important, but ours is also very important. Mm-hmm. If you look around, electrification, particularly for mobile systems, is on the rise. Just look at the number of Priuses or Nissan Leafs or something like that you see driving around. There's more and more and more electrification, not just for cars, but for trucks, for airplanes, for trains. And once you start moving things around, the thing that you care about more than anything else is your power to weight ratio, your power density. I mean, that's why you no longer carry around a 12-pound laptop. I remember when laptops came out and they were 12 pounds. If you can make lighter laptops, once you start moving it around, you care about that weight. You care about the size and the bulk that I have to carry around. So the whole goal is to try and make things smaller and more compact, keeping the same amount of power. Otherwise, your car wouldn't really accelerate when you stepped on the accelerator. Once you start making things tiny and small and more compact and packing things together, you have a problem in trying to get the heat out. So the electrical systems, they generate heat. Unless you're superconducting, and most of these systems are not, you're going to generate resistive heat. Your laptop heats up when it's on your lap. Mm-hmm. And that's just from the electricity being used and not being 100% efficient. It's much, much easier to put heat into a confined space than it is to take it out. If you remember these hoverboards that were exploding a few years ago, that's because people were trying to put way too much heat through something that was kind of sealed up for environmental reasons. And so it got really hot. And eventually when things get hot enough, they combust and they burn. To be able to manage the heat flow as well as the electrical power flow, that is what we're about in our Poet Center. And it is broad, meaning that it starts from sort of the basic materials and the micro and nanoscale, even at the atomistic level, how things interact in both the fundamental transport of electrons as well as phonons, all the way up to the larger systems like cars or aircraft. And so that span is incredibly daunting, challenging, but also it's a huge opportunity space, which is very exciting. We're also very excited about working across different disciplines because we need people not just from mechanical engineering. We also need people who work on new types of materials, people that work on new types of electrical power circuits. And they're all working together trying to solve this large scale societal problem and bring solutions not just out of the pencil and paper world to some lab bench. We want to move these from the bench into the market. We want to be doing things with some of our partners like Toyota and Boeing that you are going to ride in at some point in time, Marie. And we're pretty excited about that. And if we do this and do this well, the way we were predicting, it should have a significant impact societally, reduction in CO2 emissions, savings of energy, that kind of thing. That's one of the things that we're really after. And we're able to do all of that. I think we can walk away after a few years when my time here is done and say, yep, I made a difference. I can see the difference that I'm making around me every day.
That is awesome. And I love that you talk about the impacts and not just seeing it on the bench, but being able to see that then move into the hands of consumers. So are there any projects that you've worked on in the past that now are implemented in society?
There are some. Since what we do is we do decisions, it's hard for you to see it. There are some decision-making algorithms that we've come up with targeted to specific application domains, some in transport refrigeration. So refrigerated transport trucks that move back and forth across the highway, some of their algorithms for keeping the foodstuff cool. Again, it's not something you're going to directly see, but It has had an impact. Some of our algorithms have in that sense. Mm-hmm. Some of our algorithms have been used in designing better components for some off-highway and construction equipment. A valve and a valve body and a larger manifold and a larger equipment, but still you take those wins when you can get them. So there's some.
That's really cool because that's not something that a lot of scientists kind of get that opportunity to see it go from where it started in their hands to now being applied.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that you have to sort of realize too as a scientist and an engineer is that not all the ideas that you come up with are going to end up in the market. Even if you're working in industry, you come up with good ideas and not all of them make it in the market for various reasons. Some of them are technological, some of them are economical. And I'm at ease with that. I'm okay with that. It doesn't stop you from still trying. And those that do come through every once in a while, we're pretty excited about. There's one, for example, out of the center that we're working with, where there's a small company that's teamed up with a couple of large companies that is trying to build electrified air transport. I'm talking about battery-driven aircraft.
Wow.
Or hybrid electric aircraft. Those don't exist right now. Everything is all a gas turbine engine or a turboprop engine that drives the propulsion. Mm-hmm. Economics dictate if we can do this hybrid or all electric aircraft We can do a lot in terms of making air transportation much faster and more economical, particularly for short hops, not for the large hops between major hubs. I'm talking about the small regional hubs. There's over 5,000 regional airports in the U.S. Like 90-something% of the traffic runs through 2% of the airfields in the U.S. So if you can start to take advantage of some of these point-to-points and basically make like a lift for air transport where you don't have to go through TSA, you pull up, you get on whichever one's going, like an Airbus in the sky. Yeah. We think it could actually revolutionize air transport.
That's so cool.
That one is pretty cool.
Well, Andrew, you are working on so many fascinating projects there in the lab. And I think so far that we've talked about a lot of the exciting elements of your career. And we really haven't talked about a lot of the challenges, failures, and struggles. And I think every scientist, every engineer goes through these. As you mentioned yourself, not everything works out. So do you have an example of a failure or a really challenging period that you went through? And can you tell us what happened and how you worked your way through it?
I think that when people hear failure, they hear something negative. Mm-hmm. I don't know what failure means to you or the listeners out there, but usually failure is seen as something that is bad. Now, should it be bad?
I think it's a step to success.
I think it is too. It's an opportunity to learn. Every time I've failed, every time I've gotten a proposal turned down, the act of putting the proposal together allowed me to clarify my thoughts, and I've used those thoughts somewhere, somehow, some other point down the line. The idea of failure is one that I think in the scientific community, we really should discuss a little bit more. Mm-hmm. When we communicate science, we usually communicate the successes. We usually communicate things that work. You look into the journals, you look into the literature. Here's how I did something really neat and really cool. There are very few papers that talk about, here's what I did and it didn't work.
Mm-hmm. Don't try this at home. Yeah, right.
Don't try this at home. And yet I have a couple of articles where I tried to point out why doing something was a bad idea. Doing it this way, it's really just a bad idea. You shouldn't do it this way, and it's not going to work for fundamental reasons. And those have actually been well received.
Really?
Yeah. I'll give you one example on that. And this one is definitely very, very tangible. There's a large company we're working with, and they have a particular product they try and use. And the product basically won't work well above a certain speed that they are operating the system. Many of their competitors in the same space also have a similar type of limitation. They just can't get the performance they'd like above a certain speed. And with some analysis, we're able to demonstrate, my students and myself, is that, look, there's a fundamental reason. There's a mathematical reason why you can't do this. And that was incredibly appreciated by the upper level management. It's not that their engineers had failed. Now we had an explanation for why it was hard to do. And what you're able to do is you've learned from that. And from that learning, they stopped putting resources into trying to solve that problem because their competitors couldn't solve it either. And they redirected those resources to other things that they could use to gain themselves a competitive advantage. That got us visibility and appreciation all the way up to the chief technology officer level. I don't want to harp on this point that much, but when I hear the term failure in our technical society research domain, I get a little bit of a twitch because I think people see that. And what it does, Marie, is it tends to drive behavior that is failure averse. I meet so many young people who are so talented, and for the fear of failure, they don't try. They take the attitude, if I don't compete, I can't lose. And so they don't compete. They don't try. Because they're afraid of failing. They don't see the failure as a learning opportunity or a place to point out where you can improve. They take it as an internalized evaluation of them as individuals and a rejection of themselves and their own self-worth. And so they don't actually put forth that effort, and they limit themselves so much when they do that. They really do. Now, have we had things where stuff is broken in the lab and it's on a deadline and, oh crap, our sponsor needs to know what we got to do? Sure.
Right.
We've had that. Have I had times where I've poured my heart and soul effort into a particular proposal effort and we've not been selected? Yes, I've had that. But let me go back to the sports analogy that I was talking about earlier. In sports, you're not always going to win. And you know that. So yes, you'd step out on the court and you'd like to win. But what you really want to do is you want to perform to your best. And you want to go ahead and make sure that your team is performing as well as it can.
Sure.
What you try and do is when you quote unquote fail, that is an opportunity for you to reflect, figure out where your weaknesses are. And maybe this is where some of your coaches or your mentors really help. And this is where Carl was very good about saying, you're really good at this. Here's where I think you can actually use a little bit of attention. And then, again, like any sports, once you know where your weaknesses are, you start to go back into the off season, you work on those, you shore those up, or try and ensure that you're in situations where those don't become limiting factors, meaning you partner with somebody else who's strong in that area that you're not strong in, and build those collaborative activities. I do some stuff in the tissue engineering world. I'm not a tissue engineer. I don't know biology. I know robotics and manufacturing robotics really well. And so I partner with somebody who does the tissue engineering and the biology, and it makes a good team. She doesn't do the manufacturing and robotics very well. So together we both cover for each other's weaknesses, and we're able to go ahead and do something that is actually, we hope, pretty impactful someday. Now, in terms of back to the question, after you've struggled, you had a failure, identify the weaknesses, you go back and work to shore up those weaknesses. Then what you really want to do is work hard and trust your skills. Once you practice and you know what you're good at and you know what you can accomplish, you have to trust your skills. You're not afraid of missing that shot because you practiced it. You're not afraid of getting this proposal rejected because you practiced it. You've written enough. You know how to write these things. You're not afraid of mentoring the student, having the student graduate because you've done this already. You trust that the decisions that you're making, even though you don't have a clairvoyant crystal ball to tell you exactly which step to make, you have experience and you go forward and you sort of trust that. And winning and losing is not the same thing as success and failure. Right? Mm-hmm. Success is you're getting the most out of the skills that you have and getting the most out of the skills of the people that you work with, particularly when you end up becoming an advisor and a professor, because now you're responsible for other people, not just yourself. And so success means trying to help people achieve their potential. If I were to even call it that, failures on my part are failures to extract the maximum potential out of the students that I've worked with. Those would be the cases where I would consider my efforts a failure. And in those, I try and learn what could I have done differently. Was it something for the initial condition when they first came in that they really weren't suited for this particular role? Things like that are the things that I tend to focus on. Success and failure. I really hope the young people don't internalize failure as a negative thing.
Well, I think you brought up so many amazing points here, Andrew, and that's really one of the reasons why we try and discuss these failures and challenges on our show, is to make them less scary for students out there, to show them that you can have these, in some cases, catastrophic failures, and you can still be a successful scientist. It's not something that's going to end your career. You're going to have a lot of these along the way, and it's not something that you should be afraid of.
Absolutely.
So thanks so much for sharing your stories with us today. But we don't just want to dwell on your tough times, Andrew. So can you share with us next one of your own success stories?
Sure. And it's weird. I think maybe it's as you get further and further into the academic career, at least for me, and again, maybe it's sort of doing it, the work-life balance and the family type thing, I start to see my successes not as individual things that I've accomplished or an award that I've gotten or what have you. My successes, Marie, they are the people that I have touched. They are the students, the graduate students. They are my biggest successes. If I were to sort of say as a collective, the people that I have worked with and we're most proud of, it would be my grad students. And the successful part of it is my role as an advisor is trying to help the students find what their path is in life. And it's not unique. I think sometimes people feel that you come to graduate school as a scientist and you have to get your PhD and you have to get a postdoc and you have to be a professor. And that's not true. There are many, many paths to happiness and worthwhile contribution in this world. My job as an advisor is to help students figure out what's theirs, not what other people tell them they should do, or this pattern that they have in their head as the right quote unquote path.
The set path. Yeah.
The set path. Absolutely. No, what is it that you really want to do? And some of them don't like it at the beginning, but they realize I'm trying to do it in their best interests after a year or so. So trying to help people identify what it is they want to do and then achieve it. That to me is the most gratifying part of my job. And that's what I really count as success. And I think we've had a pretty good hit rate of being able to do that over the years. Now, with that, certainly there will come sort of research productivity. There will come ideas because several of them, these are high achieving people that are coming in. And so some of them want to go off and have an impact. Some of it could be impacting in terms of NGOs that they want to work with or being a faculty member or being in public policy. I don't know. We try and set up their programs such that they're able to achieve that. I can give sort of two very, very good examples of where that is successful. We had a student that came and was very bright and very talented, and they had done very well at the institution they were at before, and then they reached graduate school, and they came from a little bit more of a hands-on, practical undergraduate. Remember how I was talking about Princeton was a little bit more of a theoretical, and then I wanted the practical?
Sure.
They came from more of a practical, and then Illinois we're a very good engineering institution, very good institution overall. And so in the decision-making world, a lot of it is kind of abstract and theoretical. And they sort of hit in this mathematics wall and their confidence got tested a little bit. So my job then as a mentor is pointing out, here are some of the areas I think that you are weak in. You have not failed. What we've done is we've identified areas that we think you can improve on, and you're doing very well in these other areas. Now let's try and see if we can get you the skills to improve in these areas. A long story short, as he started to improve over the years, he started to get more and more confidence and decided at the end, yes, I think I want to go ahead and be a professor because I like that path and I want to go do this for others. He got himself a nice faculty job, and we'll start there later this year. And I count that as a success. We helped him find what he wanted. It took a while, and he is now set to go ahead, and he'll be fantastically successful. I have no doubt about that. On the flip side, there was a young gentleman that came in, had excellent grades from an Ivy League institution, and was very smart. It was clear that he was very smart. I worked him, and boy, things just really weren't clicking for him. And it took a long time for me to figure out why. And I got to say, we finally came to the conclusion that he had gone to graduate school because it was what he was supposed to do. It was kind of sort of what was expected of him because he did so well. And my role as an advisor, and this is a tough one, is to convince him or discuss with him that, look, I really don't think you should get a PhD. Where do you want to be? Right? Okay. You don't need a PhD to get there. You're just going to be unhappy for the next 3 or 4 years. And why do you want to do that to yourself? After that realization was sort of set in and was solid, he then transitioned to get a job at a very good company, working with people that I know who also work at that company. It's an excellent company. And I believe he's going to be much happier there. And some may see that as a failure. Oh, he didn't get a PhD. I see that as a success, right? We figured out what was right for him, and we helped him get that. And so back to this idea of what is success and what is failure, it is not as black and white, I think, as what many people might think about in this research field. It's multifaceted, Marie. I really believe so. And it comes down to finding what you want and the best path to get there.
Absolutely. I think finding that perfect fit is a challenge for a lot of people because the only thing they know is that traditional academic path. So I love to hear that you're kind of sitting down and having that conversation with students to figure out, okay, where do you actually fit best, regardless of what you've heard your whole life? So,
And it's one of those things that I've stumbled upon. I didn't have a massive playbook and said, this is what you should do next. It's one of those things. And I think a lot of it too, I don't know how it was with you, but it was something that nobody did for me. Mm-hmm. And it's something that I realized, boy, it would have been nice if somebody had done this for me. And that's kind of sort of why I have taken the attitude that let's try and do this for other folks. By the same token, even if it's a non-traditional path, if everybody in your organization ends up being successful along a path that they choose, the organization becomes successful in its own right. And so it's to the organization's best interest as well, too. So there is a somewhat selfish motive, if you want to think about it that way, in the traditional academic selfish metrics to helping people identify what they want and then help them get that.
Absolutely. Well, I think in addition to some of these great opportunities that you get as a faculty member to mentor students, I think you also spend quite a bit of your time reading the literature, catching up on everything. And I think it's nice to escape the scientific reading for a little bit to read for fun. So I'm always looking for books to add to my own reading list. So Andrew, I want to ask you today, do you have a book that you've really enjoyed that you can recommend for me and our listeners?
It's probably not going to be the one that you would think about. There's a book that was influential to me early in my career that was given to me by my dad, and it's called The Essential Drucker. So Peter Drucker is a management, but he was one of the first people that looked at management of organizations as a, for lack of a better term, science. And he had some wonderful insights in the books that he's written over the years as to what makes up a corporation. And you could substitute any large organization for corporation. Mm-hmm. And what are some of the essentials that you need for success? What are some of the pitfalls? And some of his early writings really have withstood the test of time, and they're as prescient today as they were 50 years ago. Now, you say, I think we mentioned earlier in the conversation, Andrew, you're the kind of person that tries to take an algorithmic view to life, and yes, I am. And so books like this are ones that I actually can see, oh, okay, I can see how that algorithm would fit in this particular situation. And they've been very useful, not just in professional life, but also personal life as well, too. I'm not going to sit down and sort of kick back and read a novel for escapism. Just the way I'm wired. I make no apologies for that. I'm old enough to understand that I'm not going to change.
Right. Judgment-free zone here. You're fine. Yeah.
Exactly. But if there's anybody out there that is interested in understanding how organizations work, Peter Drucker and The Essential Drucker is a collection of, I think, his first 4 or 5 books that's been pared down and synthesized a little bit. It's a great read.
Awesome. Well, I will put that out on our website for our listeners to find there. And Andrew, we've talked about a lot of different aspects of your career, but we haven't really yet touched on some of the opportunities for travel. And I love to talk about these because I think it's really one of the wonderful aspects of a scientific career is to be able to go to different places, to work with different people, and to share your own work. So can you think back on all the places that you've traveled for science and tell us which one of those is your favorite?
There have been lots, and you're right. For those young scientists out there who are thinking about research as a career, it's wonderful because you end up having all of these connections and collaborations across the globe. I dare say there's not a city in the country that if I visited that I wouldn't be able to go out and have dinner and a beer with somebody. There are a couple of places that I visited that have led to successful work and successful collaborations. There are also places that I visit that have an impact on me and have led to a little bit of insight. And those are the ones that I think might be a little bit more interesting to the audience. And those places tend to be museums. So if you go to history museums, history of science museums, or museums that have some scientific part to them, and you start to see how science is not static, how science evolves, how technology evolves, and you start to learn the impact that technology has had on human civilization, for better or for worse. It gives you a much better appreciation for the kinds of things you're trying to do in your own life day to day. And you understand, well, what I do now, it may take a little while for it to have an impact. It may have a little impact. It may have a big impact, but you are moving the wheel forward. I'll give you two pretty good examples. I happened to go to the Gutenberg Museum in Mainz. It's in Germany. Mm-hmm. So Gutenberg was one of the people that came up with this idea of movable type and the printing press. And before the printing press, you had to hand transcribe any type of written material or information. This democratized information flow, almost akin to the way the internet democratized information flow in the 90s. Because now you could put out massive copies of information for people to have. And it really kind of led to a spread of knowledge throughout Europe first and then much, much further. And so that really had a significant impact where I could see how one invention could change kind of sort of the course of human history. Now, there are caveats because folks say that movable type was invented in parts of Asia many, many years ago. And I'm certainly not going to get into the historical debate on that one. But sure. The point is an invention could have a huge impact. Another one that had a similar impact, it's small, the National Maritime Museum in Greenwich in the UK. We've heard of like Greenwich Mean Time. Yeah. So there's this, I visited the Greenwich and you stand on one side or the other side of that Greenwich Meridian and it's kind of cool. And then I randomly walked into this museum that was there and it was all about clocks. I was like, what the heck? Why would you have a museum about clocks? Why'd you have a museum about timing? I mean, what does that matter? Mm-hmm. It was only after I went through that museum that I realized, holy cow, this is how the British Empire came to be. By the chronometer, being able to keep time accurately while at sea with all the movement and motion of the ship, the way that you could put force on point was through a combination of your spatial localization of where you are and also timing, because that could predict how far you would go over a certain period of time. That ability to precisely tell time is what led the British Navy to be a dominant force, better than the Spanish, better than the French, better than the Dutch. And so they could put force on point anywhere on the globe much, much better than anybody else. This is how a tiny island in the North Atlantic ended up dominating the globe. And then you start to get the sense for, holy cow, here's how an invention led to geopolitics written on the largest scale possible. The technology that you make can matter. It can have a huge difference. Now, whether it was used for good or bad, I'll leave that to somebody else's interpretations.
Sure.
But the causality was immense once I started to realize the invention and the effect that caused. It was like, wow, that simple thing, being able to tell time, led to the British Empire. That was that differentiator. It was stunning. It was absolutely stunning. And it gave me a great appreciation for the kind of stuff that people do on a day-to-day basis. Who knows what the next one of those is going to be?
Absolutely. Well, I think just taking that moment to reflect on a lot of the things that we sort of take for granted every day, like being able to read something in print or being able to know what time it is. It's awesome to think back to the roots of those sorts of inventions. So now we've talked about some of the people that you've worked with over the years and some of the amazing students that you've had come through your own research group. And I think the people in science are part of what makes the career so wonderful. So I love talking about some of the quirky traditions and just fun things that scientists do together, because I think there are some stereotypes out there about what life as a scientist is like. And we like to break those on our program and show people that there are lots of different kinds of people in science and lots of different activities that you do as scientists. So do you have a story of your own, Andrew, that you can share with us today that really highlights this human side of science?
Without divulging too much,
You can leave names out of it.
You have to leave names out of it. There's some of those late night social events that we have at conferences and the like. We go off and we do have a good time as scientists. At least the ones that I hang out with are not drinking violets. We do make the most of the opportunity to enjoy each other's company and socialize and laugh when we can. As far as quirky, well, one of the things that I think that is probably suitable for this is what we do. We started the tradition maybe about 10 years ago in our lab is we have a holiday party. And then we have a white elephant exercise during that holiday party.
I like that you call it an exercise instead of a game. It's more scientific that way.
Oh, right. Sorry.
You take this exercise very seriously.
Well played. You're correct. You're correct. And it's a great icebreaker for the new students in the lab because you get to see what people really are interested in. And when they go about trying to move a gift from one person to another, what are some of the treasured things in the lab? Because many of the things that actually get exchanged in that white elephant find their way into the lab the next day or several days afterwards. And so it's probably about a 1 hour of a game.
Oh,
but
yeah.
we talk about it a lot beforehand and we talk about it a lot after. And it's a bonding experience that I think really, again, lets them know that the advisor, the professor, they're human too. My kids play in the game as well, too. And there's nothing mysterious or magical about being a professor. They're just like people like everybody else. We like to get together at holidays. We like to eat a lot. We like to laugh and have fun. And you do have to go clean up a kid's mess in the middle of a white elephant game every once in a while. And I think it takes a little bit of the stigma off, which is good.
Right. Absolutely. So what is one of the funnest or maybe funniest gifts that's ever circulated?
We get a lot of candles. Which I don't know why. Yeah, that seems to be one that keeps coming up. And he's like, oh, the candle. All right. Oh, the 5-pound gummy bear a couple of years ago.
Ooh.
Yeah, we put a price limit on the gifts. And somebody found a gummy bear that was literally, it was 5 pounds solid. It was the size of a normal teddy bear. Mm-hmm. And my kid's eyes just lit up and said, that's the one I want.
Yeah. Let the competition begin. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was just trying to think of how much sugar was in that thing.
Yeah, you've got to ration bits of the gummy bear.
Oh, he would eat himself sick. So we still laugh about that one.
That is fantastic. Well, I love to hear about these quirky traditions that different labs have. And I think you're right. It's so much fun to get together to show people kind of the other side of what is perceived as the serious faculty member. And I think in addition to playing these games, having fun together, it's also great to sit with your lab group and talk about the big questions in your field. So I want to challenge you today, Andrew. If I gave you everything, funding, staff, technology, feasibility, whatever it is you need or desire, what is the one big question that you are just dying to know the answer to?
So, Marie, there can be the question that I would like to have answered, and there can be the question that I would like to answer.
Ooh.
And those are two different questions.
No one has made this distinction.
Again, this gives you insight into my mind.
Right. I'll let you choose your own adventure then, whichever one you'd like.
The question that I would like to have answered, and I do not believe I have the skill set to answer this, and this goes again to knowing what your strengths are we alone? Because I believe the answer to that drives so much of what we do. We as a civilization, not as a nation, not as a country, not as a lab group. I think much of human civilization sort of strives to answer that question. Are we alone? It is the underpinning in many of our religions and our beliefs and our faiths, for example, and in such a massive universe out there. That question has stayed with us for 3,000 years, if not longer. Boy, if there was one that I would like to have answered, again, not by me, it would be that one with some type of conclusiveness.
Well, thank you for dreaming big with us today. I know this is one of these immense questions that's on a lot of people's minds. Like you said, we've been thinking about it for thousands of years. And wow, if we could just get that answer, that would be amazing.
That would be amazing. Now, if you ask what I would like to do, personally, what question that I would want to answer, it's like basically, if you remember the Terminator movies, mm-hmm. like a lot of what I do is decision making.
Yeah.
So could I build Skynet?
Ah.
And if I could, should I?
These are both very good questions. I feel like you could. You seem pretty bright. I think you've got this. I'll let you answer the other question. Yeah.
Should I? Yeah, I don't know.
Well, Andrew, these are phenomenal questions for me and our listeners to ponder today. And I know we talked about different aspects of your career throughout the interview. And I think at different points in your career, it's really helpful to get advice. And for all of our listeners out there who are looking for advice, is there one piece that really helped you that you can pass on to them today?
There's several that I could think of, and it would take a while. There's different advice that you get early in your career that is relevant, and advice that you get sort of later in your career that is more relevant after you have a little bit of the background to take advantage of that. Here's one of the ones that was given to me both by my dad as well as by a former dean and provost here at the University of Illinois. We've discussed it before. It's a quote by a gentleman called Charles de Gaulle, French. And he said that the graveyards are full of indispensable men. Now you can be gender neutral about that and say indispensable people. But the point is that nobody is indispensable. We have this culture sometimes where we build up this cult of personality, and you look at the advisor, oh my God, this is the professor, or this is the father or the mother of some area. What will we do without them? And biology ensures that you will have to do without them at some point in time. And nobody's indispensable. What you want to do is you want to work on the problems. You don't necessarily want to put people up on such a pedestal such that the organization is held hostage to some individual. And I've started to realize that more and more as I've gotten into more administrative roles. You work the people, not the problems. The other thing, I mean, it's multifaceted on this one. You are not indispensable, Marie. I am not indispensable. We're important. We're absolutely important to the organization and what we do. This podcast would not happen without you, Marie. But rest assured, you can take a break. You don't have to let it consume you. You can go and attend to other parts of your life, as can I. And the larger organization will continue.
Right. The world won't fall apart. Yeah.
It will not. The walls will still be here when you come back. And that is also an important thing to realize. So it's sort of multifaceted. One is an organization shouldn't be held hostage to an individual. And two, you as an individual, I as an individual, shouldn't hold ourselves hostage to work. Service other parts of your life as well, too. And that piece of advice is the graveyard's full of indispensable men. I have recounted that often over the last 5 years.
I like that. I think it helps maybe when you're in crisis mode, put things into perspective. Like the world's not going to end if I don't get this done by tomorrow. You know?
Mm-hmm. And you, well, how would I put it? In a large organization, there are people that can, in order to serve an individual, you can hold up the good parts of the overall organization. I guess if I use my Star Trek analogy to that, a Star Trek analogy is the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. You should not hold up the success of an organization for the needs of a single individual to the detriment of the overall organization.
Sure. Well, wonderful advice to leave our listeners with today. Andrew, is there any other last piece of advice or a last note of inspiration you want to give them?
Well, Marie, thanks very much for that opportunity. In terms of, this is something I tell young faculty, I tell my students, and this is something that was given to me when I was in college, again by my dad. He said, "You're a bright kid. Find something you really, really like doing. Do it to the absolute best of your ability. I guarantee the appropriate opportunities are going to come and find you. You're not going to have to go looking for." And that is something I would tell people who listen. Find something you're passionate about, something you really enjoy doing, particularly if you're at the start of your career. Put your heart into it. Do it to the best of your ability. If you are doing something you like doing and you put your best effort into it, chances are it is going to be successful. And if it is successful, there are many people out there who are looking to recruit successful ideas and successful people to their teams in quotes. And so that's when the opportunities will come and find you. I think a lot of people in this world try and ask, what's the next big thing, or what's the hot thing, or how do I go ahead and chase those opportunities? Fewer of them figure, what do I like to do? Let me do that really, really well, and then let the opportunities come to them. You can rest assured I did not understand it when I was 20 years old. It has become a lot more accurate and apparent when I'm 50. So that would be something I would leave the audience with.
Well, that is a wonderful note to end on here, Andrew. Can you tell our listeners if they want to learn more about you and your work, where should they go?
One of the things is you can Google me, Andrew Alleyne, just into Google, and it'll pop up either a departmental website or other activities that we're doing. My individual research group's website is arg.mechse.illinois.edu. That's arg.mechse.illinois.edu. And that'll give a pretty good idea of the people and the projects that we work on, as well as any latest news that has come up.
Excellent. Well, listeners, definitely check out that website, learn more about what Andrew's working on. And Andrew, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing a piece of your story.
My pleasure, Marie. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it and enjoyed the opportunity to sort of reflect a little bit on some of the questions that you were asking.
Well, it was so much fun to chat with you today. And listeners, thank you for joining us as well. We'll see you next time on another episode of People Behind the Science. Your voyage to explore the lives of today's exceptional scientists has just begun. You can find everything we talked about today, including our guests' favorite books, biographies, photos, and more, when you visit us at www.peoplebehindthescience.com. I look forward to chatting with you next time on People Behind the Science.